Right then, people of the channel. Now, the first thing you'll have noticed is that I am not currently in a forest trying to do pieces to camera, because for all sorts of reasons that didn't really work out that well last time round. Also, this is something of a team meeting, and hopefully it'll be in a more positive vein than I suppose some of the team meeting videos have been over the last few months, because we're looking forward to exciting things. Another thing you'll notice is that I'm not holding my microphone stand like I normally do when I've got this sort of domestic evening setup here, because I'm going to be talking for a reasonably long time, and that means that I've sort of changed the microphone settings a little bit, and I will lack that lovely sonorous booming proximity effect, I think they call it, which lots of you in the comments complain about, or some of you love, or some of you don't think about at all. Anyway, because the sensitivity settings have to be slightly higher, it may be slightly different audio than you're used to, and I'm very, very, very much hoping that the microphone won't be picking up any of the random wireless signals bouncing around my flat. Normally I actually do my voiceovers elsewhere where I don't get any interference from any wireless signals. Anyway, this is where we're doing it, and I hope everyone's going to be delightfully happy. Now, I'm going to start off with rather a good announcement. I've taken all of your opinions into consideration to the full extent that you'll be used to me doing. Obviously, I'm assured of your wisdom at all times. I think it's known as the wisdom of the crowd, I suppose. I watched an entire documentary on that once. Anyhow, I have printed off a sheet, and in fact, all of the details that are on the sheet are also on that screen. Are they? Are they not? There they are. But so that I don't end up having to keep on turning around to look at the screen, I have got my little cheat sheet here, because we're going to be going through a whole load of priorities, ideas, things that we want to try and achieve in what I called that matrix, i.e. glorified table. And at the top of it, you will now notice, because I'll bring it up on the screen, there is some good news. We have a project name, and as I was just saying, I respect your wisdom and ideas. I was asking for a new name for a project. Now, this won't necessarily be the name of the vehicle/vehicles, but I think the project needs its own sort of name, and we'll just decide what to do with that as time goes on. The project is going to be called Project Bernard.
Why, I, Bernard.
Yes, Project Bernard. I'm delighted with it. You should be delighted with it. Everyone should be delighted with it. This is a new, wonderful direction, and Alan will, and well, certainly is very, very proud. He's let me know already. By the way, I have a prospective new wrangler for Alan, who seems like a really, really nice bloke, and fingers crossed it'll work out. So Alan's next stage in life is looking likely to be rosy indeed. Anyway, back to Project Bernard. I've told you that we're looking to create an Arctic vehicle of some sort. Now, this will need to achieve an awful lot of different things. And what I've done here, this is not an unordered table. I've tried to categorize things reasonably as a starting point, and I'm going to share with you what I've come up with so far. And I'm going to ask you to share your comments, critiques in the comments. Now, most important thing is that this is not a list of cool things that I want the vehicle to have. So say you want me to have 17 enormous LED spot lamps on the front grille, this is not the place to do it. This is more about capabilities, what I want the vehicle to be able to achieve. The next stage is to work out what things the vehicle needs to physically have, and what it needs to be built of, and what it needs to have bolted onto it and in it. That is the next stage. This is simply the categorization of wants and hopes and needs for what we might be able to do. And I've categorized them into 6 sort of main groupings. The first is safety, which you won't be surprised about. The next is performance, which is the longest list. Then there is maintenance, and then there's transport, then there is cost, and then there is what I call livability. So what it's like and how awful it is, or how wonderful it is to be stuck inside this thing for potentially weeks on end. We want to try and limit the horror of being inside it. Now, the advantage of doing a ground up build is the fact that we can remove a lot of the compromises and avoid them entirely that I was having to sort of work around when I was working on Alan. So I'm going to take you through each one, and I'm going to expand very briefly on each. And then we can go away, have a think. You can tell me what you think I might need to add or remove or change in terms of priority. And then I can come up with an updated one later on. So I really am looking for your input here. I'm also not going to be doing the entire episode just talking at you, because there's a limit to how much anyone can tolerate that. I am going to finish off with a little sort of addendum to the last episode that I did on composites testing, because I've done a few sort of edits and changes compared to what we were trying to work out regarding the carbon and the Innegra and whatever from last time round. I've expanded the stable somewhat. Anyway, back to this. I've started from the top to the bottom, highest to lowest priority, and I guess we'll start from the left-hand side and we'll do safety. So the first one is, I'm hoping this won't surprise any of you, an ability for a fast escape, including when capsized. If there is a fire, if the vehicle turns over, if there's a gas release, if there's anything very, 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 very bad inside the vehicle, you need to be able to get out. I'm about to sneeze. Excuse me. Only way to solve that is a sip of wine. Yes, that's the solution. Right. That obviously needs to be, whether you're on water, whether you're on ice, you need to be able to get out, potentially with stuff. You'll need a grab bag of some sort. Anyway, you need to be able to get out if there's a big problem, number one. Next, there need to be limited combustible materials. If there is a fire on board, we do not want the vehicle to go up in flames almost immediately. Fuel and fumes separate from the living space. This is going to be important to one of the fundamental features I want the vehicle to have, and I will share my ideas with that about that with you soon. But I'm very, very keen to make sure that the area where people are spending most of their time is not where fuel and fumes are being stored. Because what I noticed on, to be honest, any boats, and importantly, and quite notably on board Alan, there was quite often a bit of a pong of diesel and oils and various other things. It would be really nice to avoid that entirely. There weren't any exhaust leaks or anything like that. It's just the nature of being near to an engine and near to fuel tanks. It'd be good if we were able, for sort of livability's sake, I guess you could put that in that list too, but also for safety's sake, to have people away from things that either smell of chemicals or are fuels, because fuels like to burn. Some of them do anyway. Stable with rollover protection. This will be down to the design of where the centre of gravity is and the sorts of terrain that we're going to be looking to travel over. But yes, we don't want to be falling on our head the entire time, and if we do, we don't want to be crushed. I think that's a fair want to have. Next, the monocoque, or whatever this thing ends up having, I guess that's a bit of a tease. The monocoque needs to withstand ice impact. We're going to be thumping into seriously solid lumps of ice. We don't want it breaking apart. I've called this one Portable Air to Aid Flooded Escape, which again almost goes into what the gadget's going to be. But I think it's also important that if we are flooded or capsized or sinking, an ability for those inside to, yes, escape, that was the top one, but also to be able to carry some form of air supply with them perhaps as they make their escape, particularly because underneath ice it's not just a case of popping up to the water surface. I want there to be entirely weather-sealed, isolated emergency lighting, because say we're working in the dark months, if our main power system goes out and then there's a disaster, I want people to be able to see what's going on. Yes, we have head torches and so on, but I still want there to be maybe an automated, isolated emergency lighting system. Fast decoupling. If you're traveling in a convoy where you have multiple vehicles attached to each other, you want to be able to disconnect from one that is floundering very, very quickly. The monocoque I want to be inherently buoyant. And that's something which is, I guess, a bit of a rollover from Alan. Yeah, I want to make sure that the boat, even though it's got a payload inside it, wants to float. I don't want something that's going to want to sink like a stone. The monocoque should be stable under tow. The idea of the boat being able to be pulled behind a larger boat or even a ship is quite exciting. And I want to make sure that it doesn't sort of swing around all over the place or want to plough into the waves or anything like that. It needs to be a good design for being under tow, otherwise we can end up sinking the damn thing. Sorry, Bernard. Safe choice of fuels. Yes, we're probably not going to be using gasoline on board, or at least as our main fuel source, because we don't want to be a floating or an ice-laden bomb. We need to have safe battery chemistries, of course. There'll be lots of batteries involved. We want to have some form of protection from wildlife, because, of course, we are going to be going into an area where there will be animals that want to eat you. That's not a particular tease. I think we all know that. And it'll be good if the vehicle is fundamentally at least delaying the ingress of animals that want to eat you with large teeth or large claws. Limited through hole openings. I guess this is, again, crossing over slightly into what I'm actually going to do rather than the want, but it's important to make sure that we don't have endless holes in the hull, because they're just asking for trouble. I would like the tub to be as self-contained as possible. Right, so that's the safety. At this point, you're very, very welcome to add lots and lots of other safety things that we must not transgress. Probably wearing a mask or eye protection that you've been telling me off about from recent episodes. My apologies. Next, performance. Must be orange. This is critical, and there will be no negotiation. There will be no debate on that. It must be orange. Bernard will be orange. It must be able to float. That goes without saying. It must be, what do I put there? Directly mount power to monocoque. Yes. The way that we're going to locomote, the way that this thing's going to move, I want that to be physically attached to the monocoque structure, so that we don't have to have like a subframe or even a chassis. Power system parts swappable. Yes, I think it would be great if, say, one vehicle becomes disabled for some reason. It'd be kind of cool to be able to unbolt stuff from it that's useful and bolt it into another vehicle and then carry on. That's just an idea around redundancy, but an idea that we could end up having a small fleet, or maybe it's just a pair of either caravan or single vehicles that are able to help each other out in a bit of a pinch. The monocoque can slide on snow and ice, yes, so although I'm looking probably to use some form of wheel or track or so on, it would be a good idea that if it can act like a sledge being pulled across the ice, so it doesn't just get scratched to hell, so it needs to have a monocoque that can handle that. No external exposed protrusions. I don't want things getting knocked off. And so, yes, there may be some stuff going vertically up, but I don't want too many things hanging off the sides or hanging off the front, which is just going to get bashed and broken. A stiff monocoque without braces or struts. I want the monocoque to be able to do its job without having to have lots of things inside it, lots of ribs or cross braces or anything that's going to get in the way of the good use of the inside of the space. So I want the monocoque to be able to do its job independently. I want to have less than 14 kilopascals of ground pressure, and this is something which I haven't just plucked out of thin air. 14 kilopascals is roughly what some of the other top performing all-terrain vehicles, and in particular snow vehicles, can achieve, and thereby being very safe on powdery snow, but also on thin ice. It's very, very low ground pressure, much less than a human standing on a foot on the ground. There needs to be excellent all-round visibility, goes without saying. Able to cross rubble independently. I don't want to have to be pulled out using winches or so on from any sort of difficult rubbly ice. It needs to be able to get itself through bumpy terrain on its own. It needs to be able to be winched across bad ice. So yes, when things do get awful, I want some form of winch so that we can move the Project Bernard vehicle, is it going to be called Bernard, from one place to the other when, say, its initial locomotion ability, say a wheel, is overcome, so we can simply drag it over a large obstacle. It needs to be able to travel at up to 20 miles an hour on good terrain, so it's not going to be winning any races, but 20 miles an hour across snow or ice is actually pretty impressive, and so that's what we're aiming for. I want to have around 50 centimeters of ground clearance. What's that in American? So that's going to be 12 plus, it's going to be 20 inches. 20 inches. That means that we won't just constantly be scraping the bottom of the vehicle the whole time. The power within spec when weight loaded. Oh yes, that's what I mean by that. So whatever power system that we use, engine, motor or so on, it's got to be well within its maximum capabilities when it's working at its hardest, so that we don't end up stressing all the parts. The ground pressure should increase for hard surfaces. This will, I think, improve efficiency, because if we find ourselves, say, on a large area of really well-packed snow or really hard ice without any lumps or bumps or water or so on, we want to be able to somehow change the way that the wheels, for instance, are interacting with the surface, so that we have less in contact at any given time, almost like increasing the pressures on your car tires, so that then we can travel that area of ground more efficiently, and then maybe go back to the old system before. And I've got a few ideas about how we might be able to achieve that. This is going to be down to improving our fuel efficiency as well as we possibly can. There needs to be unaided basic water propulsion. So without attaching an outboard motor or being towed, I want the vehicle to be able to, maybe not quickly, but at least to some extent, independently move on short sections of water. Effective vibration damping. This is not so much for comfort. I guess that comes in the livability bit. This is actually more because I don't want everything inside shaken to bits. Vibrations are an issue in all vehicles, so I want some form of inherent effective vibration damping built into the design. There needs to be the ability to regularly scout ahead for leads, and that may well just be flying a drone every now and again, but it'd be nice to have a more constant, easier, less power and labour-intensive way of looking way forwards, maybe half a mile or a mile forwards, so we can see whether we need to go left or right, because ice is complicated. The weight distribution of stored goods needs to be low down, because that will aid the performance of the vehicle in all sorts of ways, including it not tipping up and being a pain in the to manoeuvre. I want there to be a towing system for each monohull so that they can be safely pulled from either a vehicle in front or from a boat or a ship in front. And I'd like for there to be a range, and this is ambitious, of 2,000 nautical miles. You can go an awful lot away in 2,000 nautical miles. About 2,000 nautical miles, in fact. So that's what I'd really like to try and aim for, and that's going to be pretty challenging, and that's why I've been thinking about efficiency from the get-go. Right, so that's performance. Again, add any into that list that you like. Shout at me if you think I've put them in the wrong order, or shout at me in general if it makes your evening better. Next, maintenance. This is a shorter list, but it's very, very important. I want there to be lots of interchangeable power components. I've half touched on this before, but I love the idea of being able to literally unbolt and rebolt things, or move batteries, or move substantial objects from one vehicle to the other to consolidate maybe two broken vehicles into one working vehicle, and that obviously is a fairly big maintenance thing. I want there to be interchangeable windows. There will be, of course, views to the outside world around us, and I want there to be not just panes that could be interchanged between different vehicles. Say if we have to abandon one vehicle and move across in the other, and the other one has broken windows for some reason, but also just say you damaged your front window, one of the panes that you're actually using to navigate by. You might be able to remove that and replace it with one of the ones that doesn't matter quite so much from the rear. So I want them all to be standardized. I think that would be a good idea. The monohull needs to be repairable in the field. And I've looked at all sorts of ways of people who operate these sorts of vehicles. The Russians are very keen on operating Arctic vehicles. They often have to do welding in the field, and I'm sure that welding at minus 40 degrees, whether you're welding stainless steel or aluminium, which I know is hard to weld anyway, that ain't a lot of fun. And so I'd like whatever system it is to be, yes, maybe under a warm cover or a warm canvas, the ability to actually do in-field repairs of the hull itself. Also, that will have an impact on what the hull is made of itself, because certain things that you make it out of are easier and harder to patch and films and so on. It's probably not going to be made of solid fiberglass. Spoiler there. Next, redundancy of all power systems. That's not just about how we locomote. It's going to be about all of the systems inside. Everything needs to be interchangeable, and I want everything to be standardized as far as possible on the same voltage. I'd like there to be more than one power source, ultimate power source, whether that's going to be engine or magic, or whether it's going to be a wind generator, whatever it is, whichever way Bernard has his oomph. I want that oomph to be replaceable and not just have all of our eggs in one basket. I've mentioned there needs to be one standardized electrics voltage, so I was getting ahead of myself then. And then the propulsion system needs to be simple and airless. And when I'm talking about the propulsion system, I'm trying not to give away my ideas from the get-go, but I'm talking about wheels, tracks, paddles, whatever it is that we're moving by. I would like them to be simple and not be inflatable tubes, because inflatable tubes are a recipe for trouble. And I want there to be a super simple steering system. And so, although of course having a beautiful, precise steering system in a car has its benefits if you're in a car, we're probably not going to go down that route. And so I want it to be so simple that it can be maintained by anyone in the field. And so the thing that's running through a thread that's running through all of those maintenance tasks is pretty much that every crew member with a little bit of training can more or less fix the vehicle, and it doesn't need a dedicated mechanic for all but the most complicated tasks. Next, we move to transport. This is not the thing moving itself. This is about us moving it from here to the Arctic, back again, storing it over the winter, all sorts of stuff like that, over the summer, and all sorts of stuff like that. But that said, there's no reason why this vehicle shouldn't be able to operate in the summertime. Next, we're looking at the monohulls being able to nest, because if you can put one inside the other, say you're transporting 4 or 5 or 6 of them, it'd be really, really neat if they don't all have to sit next to each other. They could go one inside the other, not like Russian dolls necessarily, but to be able to have some form of shape that can sit one on top of the other and take up less space in, and this comes on to the next bit, inside a container. It needs to be able to fit inside a 20-foot shipping container. That will make life so much easier on so many levels. And I also want the monohulls to be able to raft in a 2x2 configuration, because I think that might be a really nice stable way to be towed behind a larger boat or a small ship. Towed monohulls need to rise over their bow waves, similar to before. I don't want these to be displacement crafts because they're not going to be very long, and for that reason, as we found when Alan was getting a tow a few months ago, if the boat is a pure displacement hull and is being forcibly towed faster than its hull speed, you get really aggressive bow wave sort of attack on the bow. And so, although it's not going to be like a classic planing hull, like a let's turn that back on again for nice background lighting to make sure my hair has the correct amount of backlighting. Yes, it needs to be able to rise over the bow wave. It won't be like a power boat, granted, but the ability to not have a constant sort of splashing on the bow will be good, because it could even cause damage. I also want each monohull to be liftable. Yes, not fully laden, but just the hull itself to be liftable by 4 people. I think that will pay dividends in terms of general handling and logistics later on in the day. So we'll think about that right from the beginning. Then we'll do cost. This is a nice short list. This is not going to be cheap, and I will start borrowing and probably not stealing soon to try and make sure that this is properly funded. Do get in touch. Anyhow, I want to be able to produce multiples from a single either mold or from a single blueprint, so that we can save in terms of labour, but also in terms of mold making and so on as time goes on. So everything needs to be, whether two types of vehicles actually have 2 different roles, they want to come from the same source. I want it to be fundable from existing streams. What this means is, we've built up a really nice thing on this channel, and although I love to scale and grow and grow and grow, and I'm hoping that Bernard really helps me do this, I'm hoping that at least I can use the current financial platform that this channel provides me with, and that it will obviously include the memberships, those of you who are very kind patrons who sort of do things directly with me via email, and who buy me certain specific objects that they have a particular interest in. I'm hoping that we can at least see the prototypes using the existing financial platform of the channel. We'll see how that goes. I want long term for the vehicle to be available for charter and for other people, providing they work properly, to use them. This is potentially a project which could actually turn into a business later on if this turns into a vehicle that is not available elsewhere, that's genuinely useful to people other than me. The ability to mass produce these, and by mass I mean 10, 12 maybe, and then actually offer them to scientists, to other expeditions and so on would be amazing. That was probably the right moment for that. The workshop, the outfitting area will have a limited square footage, so I don't want this to be a huge sprawling project. At the moment I'm working from my workshop. There will be obviously needs to be a heated area, a heated workshop at some point for the actual fabrication, but I'd like for this not to have to take up an entire hangar. That said, if someone has, somewhere in the south of England, a large hangar or a large warehouse which they want to donate for Bernard to be built in, that suits me perfectly. We come on to the final section. I'm sure that's rather harrowing that we're getting quite close to the end of this delightful journey through my matrix. Right, livability. The main cabin needs to be available for both serious hard work and also for domestic use. So an awful lot of situations where one object needs to achieve 2 ends. Maybe the driver's seat turns into the driver's bed, and it mustn't be uncomfortable, it must be brilliant. Everything must be brilliant. And so lots and lots of one object, 2 or maybe even 3 roles. It must be as quiet as possible in motion and also at night. Say power is still being generated at night, or there are wind generators or so on working whilst we're all trying to sleep. It mustn't be horrific to be in there. We're not going to be dealing with that sort of 85 decibels that we had with Alan when we had the engine cover off a few weeks ago. It needs to be something that people can deal with long term. I want there to be, from the power source, the reclamation of heat, so we don't then need to burn even more fuel to heat the cabin. So I want some way to use the heat that's automatically being produced by our power generation method to then be safely, I'm not saying that we're going to pump hot fumes into the cabin, a way of reclaiming that heat and using it. I want there to be an ability to reduce condensation, because inside vehicles like this you're going to get condensation, and particularly the windows obviously can't be insulated properly. You can insulate windows, of course, but anyway, I want an ability to reduce the annoyance and the danger of condensation, because of course if everything gets damp and we have electrics around, that's not good news. That then links to water collection. Maybe we can tie those two things together and turn condensation into something useful, like fresh water. I want there to be, what was I saying there? I don't want there to be axles for, say, wheels going annoyingly through the living area, because that's just going to get away of the efficient use of the rest of the space. So that's a pretty obvious one. I want there to be an integrated cooking setup, which means that yes, it's going to be in the living area, but it can be folded away and also use the same fuel source as everything else, and to be as efficient as it possibly can be. And it might even then have a side effect of adding to the heating of our area. So basically, there should be a very cleverly designed cooking setup. There needs to be room, if possible, to stand up. I found this in tents on expeditions in the past when I have used large base camp style tents. The ability to actually stand up whilst not outside it cannot be overstated. It's the most wonderful thing to be able to have. So yes, we can get out the vehicle and walk around, but it would be really nice to have at least one area where you can stand up properly. Maybe there'll be a washing area. That would be nice. I'm not talking about an ensuite bathroom, but an area that can be designated for the pleasantries of keeping ourselves absolutely squeaky clean. I want it to be comfortable for 4 working crew, but potential to transport up to 10 people and all of their stuff. That's ambitious. We'll see how that goes. And I also want there to be comfortable internal lighting. I kind of went down that avenue when it came to Alan. If you remember, I had, I think it was daylight temperature lighting on one side and then sort of evening warm lighting for letting your body sort of get towards the evening and shut down on the other side. And so I think looking at the different color temperatures, color temperature is measured in Kelvin. So I think it's daylight is 6,500. Anything warm gets down towards 3,500, 3,000, 2,500 Kelvin. And then really, really blue, white, uncomfortable light, sort of surgical light, is up at 7, 8, 9,000 Kelvin, I think. And so it'd be really important, I think, to think about these things beforehand when I look at the lighting setup. There'll also most likely be red and green lighting for use at night if you don't want to damage your night vision. So let's really think about the comfort of our eyes when we are putting burning into action. I've kind of steamed through that. I'm now going to hand that over to you and see what you make of that. If you are absolutely dedicated to telling me what gadgets or objects must be installed in this vehicle, then I can't stop you. This comment section is not like East Germany in the 1980s. You can do what you wish and I won't delete your comments, but if we can try and keep this one down to the wants, the needs, the performances, the capabilities, then that'd be great. And I promise I will come on to stuff I want the vehicle to have later down the line. With that, I'm now going to very quickly catch you up on that physical bending of composites thing that I sort of had that was following on from the last episode. Following on from my last episode, you surely must have watched by now, there's something very specific I wanted to try out. We established that when you epoxy laminate an impact-resistant cloth like Innegra, the fibres don't absorb the resin as well as carbon or glass, and so I was worried it might be a cause of delamination, even if only used in small quantities. Here's an example of one ply of Innegra with a single thicker ply of carbon fibre each side. Granted, the bond is not at all bad, but I wonder if this is why some weaves intentionally have physical gaps in them. The 120 GSM I'm using has small spaces you can just about make out, but this much lighter 60 GSM is almost more like a lattice than a cloth, so the epoxy can perhaps bond the carbon either side of the Innegra directly to itself. The layer of carbon does split from the Innegra, as you could see. Do first of all note another shortcoming of Innegra. Creases in the fabric are hard to remove, even under pressure and weight. This offcut was creased, and the imperfection remains visible in the part, albeit subtly. Anyhow, there's epoxy left on both surfaces, and whilst the company has done a good job of making famously low energy and therefore unsticky polypropylene actually want to bond, you'd never be able to peel apart carbon or glass like this. So this is my idea. Whilst in practice I'd stagger them to avoid shortened lengths of weave affecting impact energy dissipation, my experiment is to cut little gaps in the fabric. They probably wouldn't need to be this close together. The idea is to allow regular, bomb-proof carbon-to-carbon bonding spots, and so act almost like a rip stop, or in this case a peel stop, against delamination of this sort. It might be extra useful in thick layups where the Innegra or dial-in or whatever needs to be thicker, and so without the little holes in the weave the makers might have intended. You can see that I'm able to peel back and separate the carbon a short way, but it gets stuck where the holes are located. I was so delighted by that display of innovation, and by that I mean cutting small squares out of a fabric, that I decided to showcase the mode of failure of both sides of the first test piece. Carbon snaps cleanly, but after quite some resistance. The one backed with Innegra won't part completely even after all the carbon fibres have snapped. Enough carnage, Alex. And now we're back in the room, and I don't have anything else of any particular wisdom or importance to share with you, so cheers to all. Cheers to Project Bernard, and here's to the coming months. It's going to be busy but exciting, and I'm looking forward to hopefully growing the community, getting over the speed bump that let's not lie. It's been a difficult few months. We've lost a few hundred subscribers. It'd be really nice to get ahead of Steam Up now. No, Project Bernard will not be steam powered, and we will move on to the next stratospheric excitement that is this YouTube channel. Cheers. Bye.